Welcome back to the Rebel's Edge, where Pete is going to be broadcasting from Florida. I'm broadcasting from Puerto Rico, not at the Masters, but we've got stories about Rory McIlroy and his fabulous Masters win. Sorry for those of you who haven't watched your DVRs yet.
Sorry.
We've got a whole bunch of stock information, Trump pausing certain tariffs, and our take on it. All that and more on today's Rebel's Edge. Bang!
You know what? You talked about the Masters, John, and you were there, which is great. What a fun time that has to be. Although I'm not a crowds guy, so that's the one thing. I went to the one with you where we had that conference, and I was like, all right, never again. I did it. I got it done. It's all good. Just all the traffic and all the stuff going on there, man. And I can only imagine the Masters. I mean, that's the granddaddy of them. It's like the Rose Bowl, right? I mean, it's the granddaddy of them all.
It's the most exclusive one too, Pete, because only in quotes, 30,000 people get in. Mm-hmm. So some of those others, Pete, like the TPC, Tournament Players, and some of the others, might have 50, 60,000 people. Jeez. You double up that crowd, and it's going to be a pain to get in and out. You're right.
Yeah.
And they keep it, I think the people, the Masters itself, Pete, the people at Augusta Nationals, they make sure that they understand that assets gather their value by their scarcity. So there's fewer and fewer tickets every year, which means whoop, 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 prices go up because, supply and demand still works. And some people understand that. Well, folks, that is, of course, Pete Najarian in Florida. I'm Jon Najarian, and we welcome you back to another week of the Rebel's Edge. Pete, let's dive right into macro, shall we?
Let's do it. Yep.
All right. I'm going to say equity markets experienced, in past tense, positive shift, and they did so because President Trump's announcement that certain electronics will be exempt from the steep tariffs for now caused the markets to lift pretty significantly in the pre-market and into the first hour of trade. Gave a lot of that back, Pete. Now, we basically came right back down to a trend line. So the question is, Pete, if we bounce at that trend line or if we burst through it. Right now, we're holding on that trend line.
Yeah, no doubt. And it is pretty interesting, John. I mean, I think that the exemptions was 100%, at least today's macro. Things change every day, right? I mean, this news that we get has been absolutely incredible. And, we had the 90-day extension and all this other stuff going on. And it's making it pretty interesting. And although I will say this, if you put together about the last 5, 6, 7 trading days, John, it's not as bad as one would think. I mean, because it sure felt awful on a couple of those days, but let's not forget we had the up 2,900 day, and we've had some of those other names or numbers where we've had incredible returns. So the fact that we're down about what we are is not nearly as scary as it felt like it did early on. So again, I think a lot of this has to do with whatever President Trump has to say that day or that weekend about what's going on.
Yeah, well, the VIX closed at 3750-ish last Friday. Mm-hmm. So we're going to get Pete's take on what he thinks of the VIX trading down to 30 and then bouncing back up to 34 as we test that trend line. What do you think, Pete?
Well, when I look at the volatility index, John, I think it's absolutely about as amazing, but it's followed the trend. And what I mean by that is, and you and I talk about this all the time, and the guys in the pit back in Chicago talk about it, when we spike, it's going to pull back almost at the same rate as that spike that we get. And so it doesn't last long. What do I mean by that? Well, it didn't take us very long to get up to 60. And last Thursday, we were at 55 on the VIX. Well, today, as you just mentioned, here we are at 34. We got all the way down to 30. We bounced back up to 34. We closed last week around 37. It shows you that there's a heck of a lot of movement there. And it's one of those things where if it moves up at an unbelievable pace, it moves down at just as unbelievable a pace. That's what we're seeing happening right now. And the reason for that is, hey, look, when you get up over a 50 on the VIX, are you really thinking we're going to move 3 and 4% every single day? I think the answer is no, and I think that's been pretty correct. So because of that, that's why we get those big, whooshing moves to the downside, just like we've had from the upside.
Yep, absolutely, Pete. And I'm going to talk about Bitcoin just a little bit. You guys see that picture of Michael Saylor there? Well, Michael Saylor, he's, of course, the head of strategy. And strategy used to be called MicroStrategy, but now it's just called strategy. But he basically said, Pete, he bought about $280 million worth of Bitcoin on the drop. That caused Bitcoin to spike back up to 86, but then it came right back down. And today it's pretty close to unchanged, Pete, as close as you could be for an $83,000 price. It's trading basically 84,000 unchanged on the day after that $2,000 lift on the Michael Saylor purchase. Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, let's talk about Viking Therapeutics, Pete. If you didn't know it, folks, Viking Therapeutics works on some of those GLP-1 drugs. Now, as Pete would tell you, these guys do not have a big pipeline of drugs that are, out there in the market already, but they have several that have big promise. But big promise, well, that usually means that that's something in the future. So the stock has been hammered by a lot this year, down by more than 40%. Today, getting a nice lift though, Pete.
Yep, getting a nice lift. It's they've gotten a little deeper, John, with their pipeline, and I think that's been the key measure. Obviously, you need to get those things approved, all these various drugs and therapies and whatever. You need to get that approval process, and until then, if you keep on building that pipeline, that's a good thing. That's exactly what they've done. They've been moving in the right direction. Now, they've had some good news and some bad news along the way. There is a lot of shorts in this one, John. So the fact that we did see a spike of about 10% early today is not something that's very surprising to me. And I don't think it would be to some of the folks at Market Rebellion that really focus on exactly that, those shorts. You get a 25% short. There is times where there is that short squeeze and people get a little bit nervous and they start reaching up. And I would say that as they've expanded this pipeline and the fact that they are in at least phase 2 for the majority of what they've got, I think that puts them in a much better spot. The fact that they've been able to get themselves out of not just being in the one little part of where they were, but expanding that more, that's going to be big for them. Now, I think they're first class. I think they do a lot of good things. And they've got Pfizer. They've got all these different advisor types and partnerships and whatever. But this one is really, really a unique and a very well thought of company. So I think it's definitely one worth watching. They've got a great balance sheet.
Well, let's switch on over to Apple, Pete, and Best Buy, because both stocks, big beneficiaries of the president pausing for an unspecified amount of time. Yep. The tax or tariff on the incoming iPhones, for instance. He paused smartphone tariffs for at least for Apple and for domestic phones, as well as a number of high-tech computer properties. And for that reason, Pete, Apple traded up as high as 212 today. Well, it pulled back to 203, and we'll keep an eye on it for you, folks. But this stock traded below 170 last week. So this is a pretty big bounce. And we're going to see bounces like this as people assess whether or not we're going to see the pause be the pause that refreshes for a long time or just a short time, Pete.
And John, I hate to be so critical all the time of Tim Cook, and I love Apple, and I think that they've done a lot of things the right way, and I give Tim Cook a lot of the credit for a lot of the things they've done the right way. Here's one that they did the wrong way. When you put all of your eggs in one spot, right, that can be a problem. What do I mean by that? Well, everybody's got a different number, but I think the number is somewhere within this 80 to 90% of iPhones are built or manufactured in China. Do we think that's a really good idea to put all of that 90%, if that's the number, into China for them to actually do this? Or would it have been a better idea for Tim Cook to say, you know what, we're going to do about 50% over here. We're going to do a few over in Vietnam or wherever, some other market where we think that we can get a pretty good deal to get these things manufactured. I don't like it at all, and I think that's mismanagement. So as much as I don't want to be overly critical, I think they've put themselves in a really bad spot. Now, going over to Best Buy, by the way, that one didn't have the same kind of move as Apple. Of course, it wouldn't have that kind of a move, but it did bounce pretty good, John. It was a $90 stock at the beginning of the month. And then all of a sudden you're looking at it, it's trading 62. It got all the way down to 55. It's back up to 62 now. They've got great free cash flow over at Best Buy, trades at a 14 PE. So fundamentally, they look pretty good. Now the problem is going to be how does this actually pan out? They're going to get the phones, but Best Buy's got a lot of issues that they've got to deal with as well. But I do like the fact that they look like they're in a good spot right now, John, in terms of what they look like as a company at that 14 PE. There aren't a lot of big name stocks out there that have a PE under 20, and this one's all the way down at 14 for the forward.
Pete, I tweeted out something about Nike this morning, but it kind of plays into what we're talking about here with tech as well. I know Nike has a little bit of tech, but they're mainly, let's face it, they're mainly athletic gear and shoes is what they're known for. So if it costs you $10 to make a Nike sneaker, for instance, in Vietnam, and it's tariffed at 25%, Pete, well, folks, I can do the math on that. That's $2.50. How's that? So if they're selling that shoe for $100 and you're cutting your profit margin by $2.50, because you still got a pretty damn big profit margin on that shoe, could they move the shoe to 103? And are people going to squeal real loud about that if they do, Pete? I'm not so sure. And meanwhile, to your point, Pete, somebody like Tim Cook or any of these other people that's reliant so heavily on one market, probably not a great deal of diversification, which is something you and I preach all the time, Pete. It's not just in your investments. It's if you're running a company, you don't want to only, for instance, do one thing like that. You'd rather have that manufacturing, like Pete said, maybe some in Mexico, maybe some in Canada, maybe some in the United States. How about that, Tim Cook? Am I supposed to feel bad that you were a $3.4 trillion company and now it's come down to a little less stratospheric level? I don't think I'm supposed to feel real bad about that. Again, I'm not an Apple hater. It is my largest position. But I kind of understand what the president is going after here, Pete. And I think when you put it in terms people understand, like that Nike example, makes it a little easier.
Yep.
All right, let's talk Palantir, Pete. Palantir, they said Nike has acquired their Maven Smart System, known as MSS, with the system expected to be operational within the next 30 days. These guys are amazing, and the DOD and other of our allies that buy their stuff, Pete, are just blown away by what Palantir and Mr. Karp are able to do for the U.S. military and elsewhere. This one, Pete, was $88 last Friday. It traded up to 98 today, pulled back to about 92, 93, just like Best Buy pulled back, just like Apple pulled back. But going back down and retesting those trend lines and so forth, Pete, again, doesn't scare me. A straight up just jump to the upside would tell me that we're going to see pullbacks in the future, going up and backing and filling and keeping going up. That doesn't scare me.
Yeah, this deal that they've gotten, John, with NATO, this enhanced operations and all the things that go along with it, is a big deal. Now, one thing that I always like to look at, and you and I both talk about this type of thing all the time, because why are they a little bit vulnerable potentially? Well, when you've got a PE of 163, that does get you a little bit shaky a little bit, right? So I think is it concerning? No, it's because of the fact of how fast they've grown. They've done a great job. They're in the right space, all those different things. But I think you always have to have and keep that in the back of your mind that, you've got a triple digit PE, whether it's the forward or not. So you look at the cash position, though, it is phenomenal, John. They've got well over $5 billion in cash and a free cash flow of nearly $1 billion, $900 million. So I can look at that 163 a little bit differently because of how they are structured right now. But I think going into the future, we're going to see more and more and more. And they actually had something with Doge as well, John, where they've got some positive developments with this mega API thing mega API thing that they're working on. So there's all kinds of different good news stories around this one. I would just always warn people that at least be aware of what that PE is, because it can have days where it's got a great run to the upside. It can also have days where it almost feels like, hey, where is the bottom for the day? Because when it gets hit pretty hard.
Yep. Well, let's wind it up, Pete, with what's going on at Nvidia or Nvidia. You guys decide. They're going to manufacture an American-made supercomputer, an AI supercomputer, Pete, in the United States for the first time. They published this on their blog today. Of course, Nvidia is one of those Mag 7 stocks that, needed to have a little relief, and they got a little bit of that, of course, from the president. NVDA, Pete, when you look at where it got down to just in the past week, it has packed on some pretty significant upside after breaking 100 and trading to the downside last week. I mean, I think the low last week, Pete, was about 91 or so. Now it's 110. So this is definitely good news for those of you who bet on Mr. Jensen Huang and NVIDIA.
Yeah, I think we all figured that at some point they were going to get some kind of a bounce. And obviously they needed the right news story. I think they're getting the right news story, obviously, from what the president did over this past weekend. So the manufacturing within the AI space and supercomputers and all of that coming back to America, that's another really good story. The fact that it's going to be not only in Arizona, but it's also going to be in Texas, that's another really good thing. I'll also throw this one from a fundamental standpoint, John. We just got done talking about Palantir, and I said that they've got a forward PE of 163. Do you know what the forward PE right now is for NVIDIA? It's 24. Now, this is a name that it used to trade in the 70s and 80s and all the rest of that, but because it's gotten hammered back down, now it's gotten to a point where I think if it's going to turn your head, now is the time where it probably will. And you're going to take a look at it and say, well, that's pretty interesting, especially with the fact of what they're going to be doing, building back here in the United States. They've got a 4-year projection, John, of $1/2 $1 trillion worth of AI infrastructure. So when I look at that and I look at some of the other numbers and the million square feet that they're going to need to be able to use these Blackwell chips and all of that type of thing, I think that when you look at NVIDIA, you should look at it from the perspective of not what it looks like today, but what it could look like in 6 months, a year, and maybe even going out as far as 2 years, kind of that Warren Buffett approach where the opportunity now in this name is finally there. I think in the past, everybody was just running because they thought there was no way it would ever go down. Well, it's gone down, and it's gone down in a big way from the highs. So I think when you look at it now, there is opportunity there. And anytime you and I see any kind of unusual option activity kind of approaching in there, I would say that we're probably going to be attacking it pretty aggressively, because it is in a space where we have not seen it in probably since it's been a publicly traded company.
Well, let's dive into sports, Pete.
Yep.
Because, boy, so many interesting stories in sports. We'll save the Rory McIlroy for just a minute and instead perhaps take a look at this video and listen to this video about what's going on with the Tennessee quarterback. I know Pete's got some thoughts here too, but here, let's take a listen.
Man, because college football is a mess right now.
College football's a mess.
It is a mess.
Saban's at his
this is why Saban was right.
Right now, going, hey, told you so. Should have listened to me. Because this week, Tennessee's quarterback Nico Iamaleava had a holdout because he wanted more NIL money. And it was just
keep in mind, these guys were one of those in the 12-team field. Pete, these guys were one of the teams that made it. Tennessee was. Now they didn't get far.
No. But they're really good. They're a great football team, John. They're coached by a really good coach in Heupel, former quarterback at Oklahoma, total stud. The guy's done a great job everywhere he's been. He's doing a great job at Tennessee. But this kid tried to see if he could stand in front of him and who's going to blink first. I'll tell you who blinked first. It wasn't him. It was the coach said, you know what? Ta-ta. We'll see you later, kid. I mean, John, this is the problem. And you and I have talked about this. You've got to have caps in this NIL somehow, some way. You've got to figure out what should be a number. Let's pick a number. And let's just say, and that number can move. I'm not saying it's capped at 20 million and then 5 years from now it's still at 20 million. I think it's got to move and use it like the NFL has done for so many years, and it's why the NFL has done so well, because those at the bottom start to reach up towards the top and blah, blah, blah. And a lot of these teams can do that. And I think a lot of these universities can do that. Right now, as proven by the NCAA basketball tournament, the SEC's got all the money in the world. And who was the dominant team or the dominant group? Well, it was the SEC when it comes to what was going on for the tournament. They had 12 schools, John, make the tournament. And why is that? Well, because they got a hell of a lot of money, and these are all the same schools that used to be able to do this illegally. Now it's easy to do it legally, right? But you know, the kid got up there, and what I love, John, what I truly did love was, and Nico, he's probably a great kid. I got nothing against the kid at all, but I think he was advised to do something he shouldn't have. He stopped coming to practice. He told him, he goes, look, the way this is going to pan out is I'm already making $2 million. You need to pay me $4 million or I'm going to walk. And the good news was Heupel said, you know what? Nobody is bigger than this program. Ta-ta. We'll see you later, kid. And I think that was the right move. And there was multiple other coaches who kind of jumped on board, which they all should, unless they want to deal with this, John. Do they want to deal with guys staying out of, matter of fact, guys that were staying out of playing in the playoff, guys that are staying out of getting some of these spring, practices and all the rest of it, and not showing up for the meetings or the practices because you know what? I need to get paid. Well, you know what? Do you really? You're already making $2 million. That's a hell of a lot of money. And I love the fact that they basically said the portal's wide open, jump in over there. Ohio State's supposedly interested, John. Oregon is supposedly interested. I think there's one other school. But you know what? I would love to see this happen. I would love for them to not go over $2 million, just because I think the kid needs to learn something out of this deal. And you know what? I think that it's going to be interesting because he is not he might be one of the first, but he ain't the last guy to try to pull one of these things on their schools. And I don't like it at all.
Well, I have been thinking about a solution, Pete. Now, the biggest solution, of course, is exactly what you talked about with Heupel, and that is have the head coach have some stones and have him basically tell the players, this is the deal. And if you go against what I'm saying, then, like you said, Pete, there's the portal. Go jump in. Water's fine. But what I would say, Pete, is to make it more fair, for instance, for your alma mater, University of Minnesota, who has very little NIL money, very little. You can pull it up, folks. It's not a badge of honor, but with all the big companies that are based in the Twin Cities, them not backing the University of Minnesota and getting the best athletes, that's a little bit of shame, perhaps. But here's what I'd do, Pete. I'd say the maximum that you can take in, and you threw out the number 20 mil, Pete. I'll say that. The maximum you can raise from outside is 20 mil. The rest is that, similar to the NFL, Pete, you have to provide some percentage of your football revenue. How about that? I mean, in the NFL, the way it works, folks, most of you know this if you're sports fans, the players get 51%, I think, Pete, of the TV contract. All right, do something. Doesn't have to be 51%. Maybe it's 15%. Maybe it's 20%. But 15 or 20% of the combination of the TV money and the stadium, the gate, the live gate, if you will. And then put all that together in a pot. Now, all of a sudden, University of Minnesota can compete. They can get those same athletes. And if they're a little shy on the 20 mil side from the private, Pete, that's okay. You still got enough that you could sign a kid like this, not that kid though, but a kid like this, not Nico, but a kid like this. And obviously it's there for the women's volleyball team, the women's hockey team, and all the rest of the great sports that a particular university like the University of Minnesota might have. So again, a percentage of live gate and TV enhanced with some of the private sector money that is thrown at these kids from the Southeast Conference, for instance. Put all that together. Now you've got a fairer playing field of people that are getting paid. So I'll just throw that out there, Pete. Maybe I need to write it up.
Yeah, I like it, John. I totally agree with you. And I've had discussions with the NCAA. I've had discussions with a lot of coaches in college football. And I feel like all of them have an ability to look at it the way we are, but they are scared to really voice it. And it's too bad that they do that, because the athletic directors or somebody needs to get out there in front of this whole thing and start making a stop. How about this? The tight end for Tennessee. They came up to the starting tight end and they said, "Hey, kid, so what do you think about this?" I mean, he's talking about his own quarterback. He goes, "We have guys who want to be here." End of story. That was it. All he said. We have guys that want to be here. Clearly, this guy doesn't want to be here because there's no negotiation. It's $4 million or bust. So it's interesting, John. All right. Do we want to jump to the Masters and talk about that? I love the hat, by the way. I loved it last week.
Yeah, this is Trippin' Birdies, by the way, folks. It's not a Masters hat. It's sort of an imitator of the Masters logo, but it's a charity. That's why I don't feel bad wearing it, for Dave Matthews charity, Pete. The singer-songwriter Dave Matthews. And his charity is called Trippin' Birdies. So that's why I'm wearing this one. But Rory McIlroy, Pete, I was there checking out all the golf and the fun players and everything else. I'll tell you what, Pete, the chairman of Wheels Up was nice enough to come on over to me at their party, say how much. He said, "It's not an option." And I said, "That's right. It's not an option. It's not an option to miss the Wheels Up party or to not join Wheels Up. You got to check that out." Yeah. And I didn't say it to get a free ride. Connell McShane was trying to shame me into saying, "John, you trying to get a free ride on the jet?" No, Connell, I was not. But I was trying to get into the party. And it was great. And Pete, Rory, what a show he put on. Rose played his head off too. Bryson DeChambeau played well, but just not well enough. And when it came down to the playoffs, Rory had it.
Yeah, and I called for Champeau to win, John. I really thought he was gonna, because the circumstances and everything. I think it was Mark and I were talking about it, and I was bringing up the fact that he's a long ball hitter. It was pretty dry. He could get a little bit of a roll, and he really was. He was rolling pretty good until like the last 4, 5, 6 holes. It just didn't quite come together for him. But what a great guy, by the way. The stories about him going out and just walking by a group of guys and saying, "What are you doing?" And they're putting balls around. They're looking at him. They go, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Could you mind if I come and putt with you guys for a while?" I mean, what a great guy. He's a man of the people, as he says all the time. And he's just a first-class golfer. I mean, he really is a real guy. He's not some guy who's, grown up in the private world. He's a guy who has done it all, and he's really, really a lot of fun. But I think Rory might have had some of the most beautiful shots on 18 that I have ever seen. And he had 2 almost in a row of the same type of shot. The one was the main shot to get him there. And then the follow-up when he was, when they were going head-to-head with Rose. I mean, just amazing how close those guys put that ball from a long distance away and dropped it right there, just feet from the flag. I mean, pretty unbelievable, pretty exciting what they can do in front of the crowds that they've got. Like you said, 30 some odd thousand people, unbelievable. And it was probably one of the most historic, I think, that I've seen, just because of the fact that it was extremely close, but B, everybody kind of had their opinions about who was going to be there. There was probably a top 5, maybe top 6 of who was really going to come out of it. And Rory, who'd never won there, finally got it. So he got the green jacket, John.
Yep. Grand slam, Pete.
Yep.
So congratulations to Rory and all of his fans. They were really behind him, Pete. There were, people respect and give, applause to all of the players, really, even the ones that were having a tough day. But the real, feather in his cap is he's won the majors and he's won the Masters, and he put them all together. That's a pretty big legacy for Rory McIlroy. So fantastic. The only guy from the UK, Pete, that's ever done it, by the way. There have been some great golfers there, but nobody ever has done what he's done now.
That's awesome.
All right, folks. Well, Pete and I will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time. Remember, we do 3 at 3. We also do Pete's early morning walk, where he's giving you a little inspiration for the day, my 60 seconds and so forth. So make sure that you tune in to marketrebellion.com for all of that content. And we'll see you tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern time.